Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome to Women's Summit 2022. And I'm Laura Hayward. I'm the Bryant University Registrar. And it is my honor to introduce Peggy Budd. She has been a Women's Summit presentator many times. Peggy is the founder of Speaking Skillfully and a virtual communication expert who trains her clients on how to skillfully participate on a video call and run virtual meetings. She uses her knowledge of neuroscience of language to coach and polish her clients' effective communication skills and executive presence. As a trainer, Peggy teaches written, verbal, and nonverbal communication skills, perceptive talking and active listening. She provides unconscious bias training to companies to help them build strong, diverse, inclusive, and equitable organizations. Clients come from a variety of businesses: medical, legal, financial, insurance, engineering, marketing, media, and education. In addition to coaching business professionals, Peggy provides consultation services to families of children with special needs, helping them effectively communicate with their school districts by building partnerships. She trains and coaches school districts on best practices and the importance of working collaboratively with families. She co-authored a book, Navigating Special Education, Building Positive Parent-Educator Partnerships, and that will be out in the fall. Peggy has a bachelor's degree of science from Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, and a master's of science and a 6-year certificate in educational leadership from Southern Connecticut State University. She is a licensed speech language pathologist and school administrator. Peggy serves on the board of directors for the Bridge Academy, a public charter school in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Peggy is also the director of recruitment for the financial executives consulting firm. Peggy Budd.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura, and thank you all for coming, and I thank Bryant University for inviting me back. It's always exciting, and I think this year maybe more than ever because I have not stood in front of an audience like this for 2 years. I've done a lot on Zoom, but not in person, so I'm really excited to be here and happy to see all you. I want you to know that if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. You can interrupt because I think that helps the flow of conversation, as well as those of you who are participating virtually. Please put your questions in the chat room, and Laura is going to monitor that, and she will share your questions. I want to say also technically, I was asking people to try to get as close to this side of the room as possible, but I see we have a great turnout because I want to look in the camera at least some of the time, and the camera is there, but I also want to look at all of you, and it is a challenge. Working hybrid is a challenge. It's a challenge that we are all facing, and that's what I'm talking about today. So welcome. And I'm going to skip this because Laura did more than enough about me. What we're going to talk about is learning styles, leadership styles, communication, and the challenges and strategies that we need to use to be effective communicators and effective leaders virtually, because that is our new challenge, and it is a big challenge. And as I found out this morning, things always change, even when I'm not expecting it. I mean, I thought things were going to be a certain way, and they're not. And so that's what we have to face. For example, we're going to do a poll in a minute, and I thought that we could all here and virtually get the poll numbers up on the screen. And because of the way the streaming's happening, that's not possible. It is possible, they told me, but not here. So, again, those are things, if you're running a virtual meeting in your office and you also have people, these are questions that you need to ask and get answered, number one. And number two, the answer might be not possible. And just be aware of that. So we have to adapt. I want to share this because to me, I think this is where we're coming from. My husband and I have a sailboat, so sailing is something. And a version of this is something that he is always saying, but I thought this one was quite apropos of today. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. And the leader adjusts the sails. And that, I think, is what we're talking about when COVID hit. How many of us were pessimists? How many of us were optimists? And how many of us realized, which I think you all are here today realized, that we have to adjust our sails. And for some, it took longer than others. I think we can do poll number 1 to get started. So Laura's going to set that up virtually, and hopefully that's going to show up on the screen. But as they are doing it virtually, since you are going to have to do it by raising your hand, how many people, and I'm going to look at it, do you think that you just really want to be back in the office full time? If that's where you think we're going and you want to be back in the office full time, raise your hand. Okay, we have a few. Okay, very few, but okay. How many people want to continue working remotely? Raise your hand that that's what you want. Okay, and how many people feel that we are going to be part of a hybrid workforce? Okay, so it looks like, now what were your results?
I didn't see any results here, so I'm sorry.
Streaming, I hope that you are going to participate in the next poll, because Eric spent a lot of time making sure this was set up for me, but
I don't see it.
oh my. Okay, well, we're going to have to go by what we said here, and what we said here is that we are going to be, people believe we're going to be in a hybrid world, and you know what? I believe that too. And guess what? The research believes it. But one piece of research that I found extremely interesting was that, and I'm going to ask somebody here to guess, how many people were working remotely, or I should say hybrid, not remotely, hybrid, prior to COVID? What is the percentage? Yes, percentage. Oh, you were working, okay, good. Thank you for doing that. Great. Okay. What percentage of people do you think, because I know a lot of us just kind of believe that hybrid kind of came and this was what happened. How many people were working and doing some hybrid, meaning they were working and participating virtually some and working some? How many? Okay. Do you know what, does anyone want to guess on a percentage? 25%. Is that okay. 15%. Okay, 15, 25. Going once, going twice. What? Guess what the number was? You're going to be shocked. 47% of the people were somehow or another involved in a mixed bag of work at home, and whether it was meetings with clients on Skype around the world, which people were doing, but people were working. Now, what does the research say we're going to be as we're moving forward? Where do you think we're going to be? You guys are right on. There was a study done by a professor of economics at Stanford University, and he came up with the numbers that between 70 and 80% of us will, in fact, be working remotely part of the time. So we will be living and working in a hybrid world, which is why we have to learn how to participate. Okay, I have one more poll. We'll see if you can get it to work this time, or if the people at home doing virtual will please respond. Next poll. We're going to be talking, yes, please. No, Martha.
80%. So you're saying 80% is a hybrid. I'm just, the frontline folks, like, where are they? Like, they have to be. You're saying there's only 20% of nurses and
Well,
frontline police,
yes,
bankers,
no,
clerks.
I am believing I don't want to be, Matt warned me. I don't want to be, he said not to get too close to that. I was trying to get close to you. From what I'm understanding, and the study information wasn't real clear, but I could try to research it for you. I think there are people that are never going to be working. The people in the doctors. Well, the doctors are doing a little bit, but they're never going to be doing that. Restaurant workers, the salespeople, they're not. We're talking about people who are in a position who were the people who.
The study's not.
Okay, so it really has to do with all of those of us, whether we were workers or students or educators or whatever we did. We went home, COVID hit. The stores were still open. Mm-hmm. We could order online and somebody delivered groceries. They were delivering the mail. That still happened. Those people are not in that.
Okay.
They're not in
that study.
They're not that study. These are the people who are in a world that they're capable of doing a hybrid model. And some companies are saying nobody. I mean, we have a friend. He has a middle market PR firm. He closed his firm 100%. They are 100% virtual. He doesn't even have office space anymore. Okay, so those people are at the 100%. There are people who went to. Everybody's got to be back in the office, and then there's this mix. But those are people who are capable. Those are the people in the study. But I'm glad you asked because that's what questions are about. If we don't ask, then we sit there and we ruminate and say, that doesn't make any sense. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And yet when you get it clarified, you say, just like you said, well, of course it makes sense. But you have to find out. Okay. Any other questions? Good. And thank you for interrupting and asking, because that helps make things, you don't walk out of here going, what? Next question. We're talking about how do we lead virtually? Okay, I've made this assumption, and I'm going to base what I'm talking about on using transactional and transformational leadership. How many of you are either, let's raise your hand, if you think yourself or the boss that you work for is really a transactional leader, raise your hand. How many people feel?
Define that, yeah.
Oh, you want me?
Define transactional.
Okay, you know what? That's wonderful. Because I'm going to just skip this poll then. Because if I define it, that's what I want to do. So I'm going to tell you what they are. And I guess we can come back to it if you want. But I'm going to shut it down because we don't need to look at it. Okay. Transactional. When people are transactional, that is really a top-down thing. And I would say, in my experience working, that was most of my bosses. They told me what needed to be done. There was a project that had to be done. There was sales meetings, whatever. Maybe it was the corporate that talked about it, or maybe it was they were assigned a project, and these were the rules. Transactional leaders are people who basically, the people that work with, there's a sort of an interdependence on each other. So you look to your boss to lead you, to tell you what to do, to help guide you. Transactional leaders are leaders who, and don't get me wrong, there are times and there are businesses that you absolutely have to have a transactional leader. So I'm not saying that that's a bad leader. What I am going to be saying, though, is that transactional leadership isn't as effective virtually as transformational leadership, which is a different call than saying transactional leaders are bad. I'm not saying that. They are micromanagers. It's great to micromanage, and some businesses and some situations need to be micromanaged. However, that did present a problem when people were told at 3 o'clock on, March 10th, that they will pack up their belongings and they will go home and they will work remotely tomorrow. If you were a transactional leader, you didn't even have time to gall everybody together and do what needed to be done. So people were left. The people who had already knew what they were doing initially weren't too stressed because they were in the midst of a project. Those that didn't really know or were scheduled to meet to find out more information tomorrow were kind of up the creek without a paddle, and they didn't know what to do because of the kind of leader that they had. Not bad or good, leadership style, pre-COVID, pre-virtual, probably worked. And so that's what I'm saying. Another thing is that transactional leaders tend to be people who talk and tell. They tell you what to do. They're talking to you. Their goal is to get this project done, get the team to do what they need to do, meet the bottom line. All good things, all things that all companies have to do. Okay. Transformational leadership, which is very, it's more effective when you're working virtually, is those are leaders who create independence. They create people who are more open to being creative and solving their own problems and figuring out, okay, this is what we have to do. We have this project to do. However you can get it done, just do it. That's okay. It just needs to be done. There isn't an order. There isn't a time frame in the same way, except that there's a deadline. We're not taking that deadline away, of course. And so they encourage that problem solving. Their goal, the goal of a good transformational leader, is to develop the talent of the people that work for them. The transactional leader, their goal in their mind is to just get things done. We want to solve it. Now, in some situations, that's what has to be done. We're going to be talking about how virtually it's oftentimes harder to do it because you don't have you can't run into your boss's office or the boss can't come by, oh, you're here. Well, you know what? This is the next thing that has to get done. We think about transactional leaders as people who are talking and telling, communication style. Transformational leaders are leaders who are asking questions, who are listening to what their employees are their team is telling them, and developing that sense of cohesiveness. Now that I've asked that question, and since the poll wasn't working, if people from home want to type in what kind of leaders they think they are, Laura will check it. Let's just, let me ask you, how many of you feel that your leadership style or the leadership style of those who you work for are more transactional? Raise your hand. So I am shocked. I am really shocked. Everyone in this room believes that their leaders are transformational. That's a
No. Other. No.
So you. Oh, and what is other?
Not really a leader.
Excuse me. Too naive here. I thought everybody had a leader. How many people feel that their leaders aren't leading? Is that the majority? We feel that we have leaders who just don't know how to lead.
No.
Okay, there's still, yes, anybody?
No, I was just going to comment. I think something I've observed during the pandemic is the majority of our bosses were trained to be transactional.
Yes, they were.
Therefore, the transformation into transformational didn't occur for many of them.
You're absolutely.
So that's why we have no leaders. Just doing our jobs and showing them how to get from A to B.
You are 100% right, Carolee. And that's what we're talking about, because too much of that happened. That's why we who were working for people were struggling. That's why the leaders were struggling, because they didn't know how to make the transformation. They didn't know how to move from being there, creating that interdependence, to creating the talent and letting you, the people, work. Yes.
You know, I just wonder how much of transactional and transformational also speaks to a leader's level of trust in their team.
Correct.
I used to manage a team of 16 people remotely. That's a lot of people. I can only do so much in a day. So I've got to trust in them. It was a necessity. It's my natural tendency anyway to say, if I treat somebody like a grown-up, they're going to behave like one. And for the most part, that works. But I think you can't leave trust out of the conversation, the two-way trust. One of me as a remote employee, trusting that my boss has my best interest at heart, but two, as the boss, trusting that my team's going to do what they're supposed to do.
You're 100% right. And what the difference is in the transactional leader, trust is in the mix. Trust is always in the mix. As Laura said, I just wrote a book, and we've written a lot about trust and transparency as far as how we work as a team and build a partnership. What happens is that in the transformational process, that interdependence, it doesn't have to be lack of trust. It's just mindset. So it's not necessarily that, and I'm going to look into the camera for a minute, not at you, because I feel like I've neglected all these people here. Transformational leadership builds that I'm going to get the most out of the people that are working for me. So yes, trust is a factor, and I don't want to deny that, but trust is only a piece of it. It's that I'm going to develop your talents. I'm going to develop your problem-solving skills. I'm going to develop your creativity. And then with that, we're going to get this done and I'm going to listen to you. So I like that you brought that up, because you're right. And I think, and I'm not meaning that you are in any way a transactional leader, but I think a transactional mindset puts trust into that mix in a different way than a transformational leadership puts trust in a transformational leader almost assumes trust is just there. I trust that you're going to do your job. I'm going to nurture you, coach you, get the best out of you. So it's innate in the transformational leader. The transactional leader says, wow, I trust the people that work for me, and all transactional leaders don't have that trust. And I think, am I correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, good. So we're all...
Poll results from online. So
yeah.
4 people said transactional, 34 said transformational, and 2 said other.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for starting to participate. So I'm glad we figured that out. Let's see where we are here. Okay. We just went through all that, so we don't have to do that, which is great. Now I want to talk about communication, and we don't need this slide. The slide is really there because I believe slides help kind of stimulate your brain and get you to think, but I would rather have you listen, and I like that we're engaged, and I am going to tell you I'm struggling because, as I'm going to talk about, looking into that camera is so important. And I'm sure that the people at home, and Matt and I did a little check earlier, that when I'm looking right there at that camera, all of you in the room feel like I have just forgotten you were here. And yet the people who are watching virtually say, wow, Peggy, you're finally talking to me. So it's a real balancing act, and it's one that I have to learn. And I think I've been spending so much time on Zoom that I've been learning to look right into that camera. But you know what? It's great to be looking right into all of your faces. So on that note, let's talk about, yes.
Sorry, I have a question. With the increase in podcasts, which have become very popular, there is no face-to-face. There is no looking into the camera. But yet they have an abundance of followers. Don't you think that perhaps we're heading in that direction where, not that eye contact isn't important, but that at some point we're going to be where it doesn't matter if you're looking at the camera or looking at us, we're here to hear you. So it's more important that we're hearing you than it is that we are looking at you or you're looking at us?
Okay, I think a podcast has a very different, fills a very different need. You're right. A podcast, people listen to a podcast to learn something. End of story. That's what they're doing, learning. My point here is not to teach you. If I was giving you a podcast, I would have asked that question of what is, and I would have said, oh, everybody would have almost shut down and stopped listening because they would say, I don't even know the difference between transformational and transactional leadership, and I would have lost them by being engaging with an audience.
Yeah, no, I'm not taking away the engagement part. Personally, I can only speak of my own, I watched last year's summit, which was all virtual. I don't think I looked at the speaker once.
No, as a participant, you wouldn't look at the speaker because you're just sitting there. But the speaker, I hope, was looking directly into that camera, and you would have felt that they were talking directly at you if the speaker wasn't. It's not you, the listener, that's looking into the camera. It's the speaker, not the listener.
But if you're looking into the camera and I'm not looking at the screen, but I'm still getting the engagement.
Okay, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm going to tell you, the people at home, I can't see them. So that I don't care what they're doing. They could only be listening to me. They might not even be seeing me, and that's okay, because this, for them, it's like a podcast. For you, in the room, it's not. But when we're having a virtual meeting, which is what I'm talking about, when we're trying to engage and lead teams, it is about looking into the camera. It is about looking at people. That's different than a podcast. So let's just take the concept of podcast, and it's not what's going on, okay? Okay. So when we started and when COVID happened, as a communication expert, I felt a great need to figure out how to help my clients, how to decide how to effectively communicate virtually. I gave lots of talks, including here at Bryant, how to be an effective communicator, how to bridge the gender divide, how to look at different generations. It was communication face to face, and I really struggled. So And initially, there weren't a lot of things written about it because even though I said a lot of people were doing it, nobody really looked at it as kind of a way to run a meeting and a way to do things. So I went into my networking mindset and said, who do I call? And I have a client who happened to be an award-winning News 12 anchor person. So I thought, what better way to find out how to communicate virtually, kind of where you're coming from, how to communicate virtually to people. How are we going to, what do we do? So when I called Becky, we had this great conversation, and I'm going to share her advice with all of you. First of all, what she said is when you are on a virtual call and getting ready for a virtual call, each of us has to be our own camera person and director. And what that means is the job of the camera person and the director is to say, how do you look? How do you sound? That's all they're doing. They're not worried about what you're saying. That's another problem. They're worried about how you're coming across to the people that are watching and tuning into the news. So how are you coming across to the people sitting on the other side when you click join your meeting? And I'm going to ask you a question, and it's not a poll, so we're just going to all raise your hands, and people from home can answer. Before you join that Zoom meeting, how many of you click on that little icon that says check, and actually on Zoom it says check your audio, but you can check audio and video. How many of you click on that before you start your Zoom call? Raise your hand. Okay, I'd say good. Now keep your hands up. I got another question that's related because some of you are going to put it down. How many of you do it before every single call? That's the problem. We get great, some of you do, and I do because I learned. And you know why you can't? All right, you get up in the morning, you set up you get ready for your Zoom call, you set your camera, I'm doing my job, I'm checking my audio, I'm doing everything. And you check your visual, make sure your lighting, and we'll talk all about that. And everything's perfect, and you do your first Zoom call. I'm hoping that you get up after that call and walk around, whether it's to go to the bathroom, get a cup of coffee, or just stretch your legs. Oh my goodness, guess what? You sat back down. I know that your chair at your desk is not glued to the floor, so your chair may be a little bit over to another side when you sit down. So now your camera angles may be a little different, which means the lighting is maybe a little different. I also know something. The sun, unless you're working in a closet or a room without any outside lights and anything so that your lighting is never changed, the lighting is going to change. So how you look is going to change. So, and if you have a laptop, maybe you touch that computer because it wasn't glued to your desk. So everything can change a little bit. So that's why it is just best practice to go click, look, everything looks fine, move on. It's not a big deal, but I recommend you do it all the time. Okay, questions? Communication. When we were meeting face-to-face, and as I've done since I've seen some people, it was nice to greet people with a handshake, even a few people that I hadn't seen with a hug. You can't do that virtually. How do you make that connection? We've got to make that great first impression when we see people. How long does it take to make a first impression? Who can tell me? 3 seconds. What are you doing as that video is starting to connect? Are you getting ready and giving somebody a virtual handshake? Yes. Virtual handshake. How many people are consciously aware that we should be giving a virtual handshake? Oh my goodness. Not very many. Well, I'm going to tell you. A virtual handshake makes sure that the person, so when you're clicking on, you should be ready. That means you've already checked everything. That means that you're not on the phone. That means you're not searching for your papers. It means that you are ready to greet the person if you're letting them into a meeting, or if you're joining a meeting, you are ready to join that meeting. And when you connect, you should be looking directly into that camera so they know that you've greeted them. You should be smiling. You should possibly even be sort of leaning in. And you know what? I'm always waving. Because I feel, hi, it's so good to see you. I'm here. Now, that's my personality. And each of you has your own style of how to greet people. But if you're not greeting them and giving them that virtual handshake, there's no way that oxytocin connection that we make when we shake somebody's hand, when we physically, touch them on the shoulder, you're never going to do that virtually if you don't give that virtual handshake. So that is the very first part of communication, is that virtual handshake.
I have a question for Paul.
Good.
Up there.
Out there.
How do you get people to turn their camera on for virtual meetings, even when the culture is to turn them, on? How do you get people to turn on their
I
camera?
was going to ask the same.
Okay. The culture, it's, again, as a leader, we have to set that stage. We have to make those requirements. And that's almost where you want to be transactional. This is not negotiable. Just before COVID hit, I was going to be doing some training in Boston with a private equity firm, and then everything got put off. And so now we were doing all of this virtually. And when we got on the call to set things up, I said, I can't do it because I'm the outsider coming in, but for this to be effective, there's got to be rules. And the rules are, when you get on this call with me, there are no cell phones and there are no cameras off. It's not negotiable. I was telling Laura, I was doing a second round of training for them, and we had these dates, and trying to get leadership in a private equity firm all in the same place available is really a challenge. And one of the guys was coming back from a trip, and he was told, fine, you'll be in a car with a limo driver, and you will be on your phone with your camera on and participate. And I think it's, again, going to culture. And even if the culture isn't it says we do it, if it's only lip service, the culture isn't going to be. We have to really do it. And when I'm talking, I say, please turn on your camera. We miss half of the conversation. You're looking in the camera, but you should be doing a dance. You should be looking at the people, at their faces, really, and getting that nonverbal cues. And if you're not doing that, you are missing out on part of the conversation. And also, and I'm not going to say it's a trust factor, I'm going to say it's a natural factor. If people don't have their cameras on, they are probably multitasking. And I would be willing to almost put, I don't want to say the bank on it, but I'd say a lot of money on it, that people are multitasking. And I want them to be engaged in the conversation. It's not that I don't trust them. It's that I need them. Remember that I can't get the most out of the people that are working for me and with me and working as a team if they're doing two things. I need them to have their voice, and I need them to be engaged. And I'm just really skipping all around, but it's okay because I like to do that. Virtually is even more important than anything, that everybody's voice is heard. That's why you should give an agenda. Giving an agenda for a meeting is best practice. Lots of people don't do it, or they hand it out 5 minutes or as they walk in the door. Virtually, again, we didn't change just platforms. We needed to change mindset. So virtually, I recommend that you get an agenda ahead of time so that everybody knows what the topic is. What are we discussing at this meeting? If they have something that they want to contribute, they're prepared. If they think something else needs to be discussed, they can add it to the agenda. And then as a leader, we need to come to that meeting and make sure that everybody's voice is heard. And that goes back to the virtual handshake. At a regular meeting with your team who sees each other at the water cooler, at the coffee machine, at whatever, you don't have to be intentional. It's organic. At a virtual meeting, you've got to be as intentional as possible. You've got to plan every single moment. And so therefore, you need to make sure that everybody has a voice. And I say maybe even making sure everybody says hello, and thinking of the size of the people at the meeting. This size room, everybody can't say hello. If you have a small group of people and a team of 16, it's harder. You may want to break it down sometimes, because it's harder to get everybody to have a voice, unless you go into breakout rooms, and there are all kinds of things you can do. But it's important. There are great techniques now that everybody can kind of have a voice. I was reading something that said, and you can do this with a large group, if everybody's virtual, everybody takes a picture, let's say, of their shoes, because we're all wearing comfy shoes or no shoes or funny socks or whatever. Everybody just takes a picture, and then what do? They just post the picture. Now, everybody's kind of contributed, and somebody, you'll laugh, something like that. Those are silly things, but did everybody kind of got connected? And maybe if they knew they were going to do it, maybe they intentionally wear their slippers that have ears or something, just to be funny, just to show their personalities, whatever it is. Making sure that you call on everybody. It's not, does anyone have questions? It's, if we're doing a discussion, Melissa, what do you think? Jen, what do you think? Karen Lee, what do you think? Giving everyone, encouraging that voice. Again, remember, transformational leaders are going to be doing a lot of listening. And so it's not about coming to the meeting and talking at them. It's really about problem solving and coming to them. I want to, try to talk. Yes, Jer.
Can I just ask a quick question, kind of similar to what somebody had asked in the keynote, to the keynote speaker who was talking earlier. But in that space, just thinking about the different types of personality, an extrovert versus an introvert, and just wanting to make everyone in the room comfortable coming to the space, how they feel comfortable. What advice do you have on that? Because I feel like it's a bit stringent to be like, purposely calling on people or like telling them they have to be on camera. How can you kind of like find a balance in ensuring that people feel comfortable coming to the space how they just feel?
Okay, I respect that, and I understand personalities can, make us uncomfortable. If you were in the office, you didn't have any choice of attending the meeting, correct? So, and you didn't come in with a paper bag over your head. You came in, and I'm trying to be silly. You came in, so the culture. Why are we changing the culture virtually? Just because you're home, what's that matter? And I know people talk about, well, where my space is, find a space. If you sit yourself in front of a blank wall and a closet door that has nothing on it, you can narrow your, as my friend Becky called it, your real estate, huh? You can narrow your real estate so that you've narrowed what people are seeing. But it's important. You didn't have a choice in the office. Yeah.
You can put a background on.
And you could use a virtual background. That's a,
You can just blur your background.
correct. There's so many ways to avoid people seeing your personal space if that's your problem. But you didn't have a problem. You didn't have a choice when you go to the office. And again, it's a culture thing. If everybody knows we get online, we turn on our cameras, we show up, and if everybody knows that everybody's voice is important, that's going back to what is a transformational leader. I value your voice. In the book I'm writing for parents and educators have to respect and value each other's voices. And each person, each one of you goes to a meeting, you bring something special. I can guarantee it. Otherwise you have a job, and that's why they hired you. You have something to bring, either something that you've been working on, something to say. It's important. Now, if your personality and you're uncomfortable, my recommendation is set up a one-on-one call with your boss. Have a conversation. Let your boss know what you're uncomfortable about, why you're uncomfortable, and start bridging that. That's helping you grow, number one. Maybe your voice is, you say to your boss, you know what, I don't want to be called on, but I want to, I will report on something. So I want to volunteer. I want to be in control of when I say. But I don't believe that we're getting the most out of our teams if we allow people to just sit there and be passive. Yes?
I think one other thing is with the introverts, I think it's easier to steamroll an introvert in person and not let them speak up. They're not the loudest person in the room. They don't want the attention on them. Where I find, because I teach classes online too, that the chat box is really effective for the introvert out there, because they're going to say what they want to say. They may not raise their hand and say it out loud or turn their mic on, but they will put it into the chat box, and they're getting heard. They have this whole new vehicle to
Correct.
be heard they didn't used to have. So
Right, there's a lot of different ways. And you were going to say something, yes?
I wanted to piggyback off of that a little bit. So I'm with a team that's globally, and they're all remote in different countries. And so some of my team's introverted, some's extroverted, and what I struggle with is getting them to turn their camera on because it's all different times of the day. So what's your tip of that? Because I'll have someone where it's 6 a.m. for them, 10 a.m. for me, 6 p.m. for someone. So the feedback I get is oh, I'm tired, oh, my times, and I'm yeah, I know, I'm introverted, so I really want to see your face. And they'll put it on when we're in a one-to-one,
Right. And again, I think it's setting it just like I asked when I ran this for the private equity firm. This is the way it is. It's not negotiable. We all have to do it. We're going to do it. You're working now, whether it's 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. or 3 in the morning. We're at work. We're doing this. Your voice, you matter. You are important. And part of knowing you're important is everybody seeing everybody. And so, again, having a offline, it's not offline, but you know what I mean, a one-on-one chat to have that conversation can help as the boss so that you kept to understand. That doesn't mean you're going to say it's not negotiable, but it just means you need to understand them and hear them. And if they have a problem, maybe they say to you, you know what, it really is because on Tuesdays, this happens and it's a bad day. Could we change the meeting to Wednesday? Then I have no trouble turning on the camera. So again, we have to respect there are a lot of problems, internet connections, things happening in the home that can interfere. So you want to have all right, being online, camera on is not an option. I can change the time of the call. I can change the day of the week of the call to meet your needs. So now you, even as the boss, you're transformational. You're listening. You're being open without, but you're still holding firm to the fact that they're important. And I think when people feel they're important and really their voices are mattered, all of a sudden they feel important. Most people, whether they're introverted or extroverted, if they don't speak up, it's because they think no one cares what they have to say, one, or they are so used to giving what's called a verbal dump that they say so much that nobody wants to listen to them, and so that's a problem. Yes.
Jane Maxson, I just was sitting here of an alternative, and I just really thought, what about if we had a meeting where we all turn off our cameras? But there are introverts who really are uncomfortable. Okay, today we're going to honor all the cameras, shut it off, have that meeting, and then have a next. So that's a way to kind of please everyone. I just had that brainstorm I wanted to share.
Thank you. And there are pluses to that. There are pluses to that, and I respect when we're looking at meetings. As a communication person, I just feel that when we think about communication, and we can think about the fact that we go to that there are basically 3 buckets of communication. We have our words. So if the cameras are on or off, our words are still heard. However, and we have our vocal tone, volume, all the vocal aspects of communication that allow you to hear what I have to say. Cameras on or off, we all get that same message. However, 58% of what we deliver is delivered non-verbally. And so therefore, if our cameras are off, we are not fully communicating with the other person. And that is where, even though, Jane, I hear what you're saying and I understand it, I say as a communication person, and if we're trying to have a team and we're only meeting with these people once a week or whatever, we've got a problem. If we're missing half of their communication, they may be sitting there, as I said, either multitasking because now they don't have to even pay attention, or they may be sitting there saying, I don't know what transformational and transactional is, and I'm just shut down. Well, forget it. I don't even want to hear this today. So we've got a lot of problems. And the research on that says that, and that those numbers come from, it's called Moravian's Rule, goes back to the 1960s, still very much embraced today. And what we know, because most of us are visual learners, so we respond to visual cues. What the research found is if my words and my vocal tone and my nonverbal language, meaning I'm looking at the speaker, I'm smiling, I'm engaging, I'm doing all those positive things. If all of those things together send the same message, that's what I remember. If the nonverbal part sends a different message, I'm sitting there like this, or I can't even see you, so I don't even know what you're thinking, guess what? You might not even value their words even more. So it's the yin and the yang of it, and we have to just figure it out. Yes?
So this discussion I'm having, will go on over my head.
Good.
I have one member of my team who always has a technical issue.
I know those people. I've met them. Yes.
So we've been accommodating, say that, but what ends up happening is the group has to call him out and then wait for him to answer in chat. And that's disrupting everyone. And it's a little passive aggressive, it's feeling like. So I've got to fix that wagon
Yes.
tomorrow.
Yes. Yes. I agree with you. And one-on-one with that person, and really let them know, and maybe share some of the things we talked about today, because it is important for their voice to be heard, and it is important for us to see them. And as the leader, and if, what can the company do to support you? I mean, if...
Is he trying to send the message that it doesn't matter whether I say anything or not? And I can't let that message continue.
Correct. Right. There's a lot of things you want to do. And if it's really, truly, I mean, and I'm not responsible for your company and the money you spend, but if it's really, truly an internet problem and that person really, truly can't afford it, then you could say, look, we'll give you an upgrade or whatever, because then you're putting them on the line. Okay, do you need a new computer? Do you need do we need to pay for a little, broader bandwidth? What can we do? So now and then you're being very considerate. You're saying, I understand all this. Your voice is important. You have to be on. Now, how can I help you to make sure that happens? And now that takes it out, and then you're going to find out what the cause is, I think, or I hope. Yes.
So one of the when you're presenting, because then you're sharing your screen, you're seeing less of the people. Like right now, as you're presenting, your presentation is behind you. So you can still connect, you can still see people's faces. The biggest struggle I have is when I'm doing a presentation and there is a deck to be presented and I'm sharing my screen and then trying to look at both, like trying to have that connection, but also, and what they're looking at, because now you don't know what's on their screen. Do they have your picture up? Are they still seeing your face? It's much harder to connect when you're presenting. What recommendations, what ideas do you have for that?
Okay, that's a great question. And I will tell you that if any of you attended any of my sessions pre-COVID, I very much used PowerPoint to drive everything. And I would have, excuse me, pictures, I need a little sip here, pictures that would help stimulate rather than just word, because I don't like a lot of words, but I would leave it up there. Because I would figure I'm in the room, I can engage you, you're not going to watch. You're on the screen, I can't engage you. I have gone to using very little PowerPoint because I feel that I'm the person speaking. I want to see all the people. Whenever I've been in control of a meeting, I will tell the people if they're asking me to speak, I do not want this to be on, I think it's called webinar format, but I want it to be on meeting format because I want everyone not to be able to raise their hand, to be able to speak, not just to have to be in the chat. So I'm in control of that. And because your deck is what you have to present. It doesn't have to be in a PowerPoint for you to get that information out there.
So what you're saying is give them the deck. I mean, they still have, like, for me, it's often that we're presenting, reporting, those kind of things, reports, presentations to clients, for products. So you have to have that. It's really
Okay, the data, and even when I've coached clients on doing presentations, I tell them, if you use the PowerPoint for your presentation, the deck piece of what you're talking about, the data, I have that. I encourage them to put that in what I call an addendum, give it to the client. They have a hard copy of it. And so you can say, because then you're not even connecting. I want you to look at,
So
things. Not the deck, because what you're saying, but the data. Send that ahead of time, because now you're going to have a more meaning. First of all, they will have been able to review it. They can write their questions. I'm on the board for a charter school. We get all of the financial reports every month before the meeting. I can look at it. If I have questions, we get copies of the minutes before the meeting so that we can have reviewed it, so that we can approve it. Anything new? No, that's not. And I think as we are doing things virtually, slides are less helpful. That's why I created something. So you saw the agenda. You could have it. You know what it is. I gave you, kind of highlighted a little bit, enough that you didn't need that. I think we're moving away virtually. I think one-on-one, I think pictures and things can stimulate lots of conversation. But again, remember I said at the beginning, we didn't move. We didn't just change platforms. We have to change mindset. We have to think about what are the problems and how are we going to communicate effectively with those people at home, in a remote world, around the world.
I know that you're more on like the management and leadership, but if you're doing like a sales presentation, how would you recommend? I mean, usually we go through these are your products, this is your information. Never really done that type of presentation without a deck.
Correct. Some of the things, again, like an agenda, here's the things, you can send that ahead of time so that they know. Your words are not, I'm selling remotes. You would have a picture of that on your slide, we're selling remotes. You can send them that, we're selling remotes. Okay, now when we sell remotes, what are the values of remotes? That's what you're talking to them about. That's your conversation. So your presentation, and again, it's rethinking how we present. Too much of what's been done have been scripted. I hate things that are scripted because they're not customized. They don't go to the client. They don't really these are the 5 things we're going to say. When people say to me, what's your program? I say, no, I'm going to talk to you. Where are you? I have a educator's mindset and maybe even a special educator's mindset. I believe I take the customer from where they are and move them here. There might be 5 things earlier. If they've already done that, why are they paying me to go over it? Why am I wasting their precious time? Time is money. Let's start them here. If they have to be here, then I need to know that, and I will.
It's interesting that you say that because our first meetings are without that deck. It's more conversational. Our end meetings at presentation time are still a lot of conversational and are customized, but are still traditionally the same presentation that we've used previous to COVID.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. We need to be thinking about and modifying and looking at what are we doing, how are we doing it. We didn't just change platforms. That was the whole idea. Yes.
The last comment was from Teresa, but this comment is from Shamika. She says Zoom annotations work to make a PowerPoint more engaging too.
Yes. And there are lots of ways to do it. It's about being creative and thinking. And I think that I had one more question, and I think then we need to kind of wrap up, right? And we'll pull the hat and the card wherever the bag is. Yes.
It wasn't a question more. Run into this as well. Your second screen, you can open up and present with one, and also a co-presenter can move you through your PowerPoint slide while you're doing the engagement.
Correct, but you know what? I'm just going to say what we know about visuals is if that visual is up there, even if you're in the room, you're reading it. That's why you should only put 2 or 3 words. So it's fine. If I want to do something, I will, like I did, I'll show it to you, see it, and now while I'm doing the rest of the talking, I don't want you to see it. If you leave it up there, it's a distraction. So, there is so much more we could have talked about. I know we have to, you all are probably getting hungry. Thank you so much for your... And thank you. Please, thank you.